So in this last part, second part of this fifth, or this video, second video of the fifth part of our publishing cycle and peer review video lecture series. Here's the last slide from video 5A. Again, how to organize review comments and pick your battles. I do want to, again, point out to that last line under number 4, where it says, maybe say, quote, excellent idea, but beyond the scope of this study. The other rhetorical move that I mentioned earlier, let me go back to a few slides. And I want to just bring your attention to this again. We thank the reviewer for X. Again, this one was a sarcastic take on that, but those are common rhetorical moves or phrases that it's okay to use over and over to signal, we thank the reviewers for the suggestion, or thank you for suggesting this. Here's how we address it, or here's how we choose not to address it, right? That's sort of a standard rhythm of the responding to reviewer comments, right? And again, 50 to 75% of requests, ideally you want to meet them and do something with them and pick your battles wisely, the ones that you are not really, where you're not taking their suggestion. And even if you're not taking their suggestion, I would still try to, quote, do something with it. Maybe saying something like, hey, thank you for the suggestion. Our paper goes in a different direction. However, maybe we added something in the discussion section, a phrase in line, whatever, to address this and to alert readers to that, something like that. It's a lot easier to do that if there's a friendly spirit in the peer review and a tone than if the tone gets a little, attacky, for the lack of a better adjective. You feel like you're attacked. So let's look at an example. This is from my colleague, Dr. Henry Silverman, who's a pulmonologist in our medical school, as well as a specialist in research ethics. He's run several programs funded by the NIH with folks in Saudi Arabia, in Egypt, in Myanmar. He's also a part of a project, I think, with the Guyana, I believe. I'm misremembering that, as a colleague in the School of Nursing. Anyways, he has done a lot of work on research ethics. So here is an example from the original version of his article, which was about, was an interview article on, what was it about? I don't remember the context, but this was from the method section on analysis. So here it says, we use grounded theory as an analytical approach as if the interviews proceeded, blah, 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 blah. So if you want to take a quick look at this, you'll have this in a handout as well in our materials section. If you want to pause and take a look at the handout first, you can do that as well. I'll make a note in the module section to look at the handout earlier, before you click on this video. So that's the original version. So here is the reviewer 1 comment. Qualitative methods are appropriate. However, it is not clear what type of qualitative inquiry analysis has been used. The authors state they use grounded theory methods for analysis. However, the approach would seem more accurately described as an exploratory qualitative descriptive study using content analysis. So this is a significant, it's some feedback that really gets to the core of the methodology and could really derail the paper, and is something that definitely needs to be addressed. And it is actually a very warranted critique, because the grounded, if you're familiar with grounded theory or not, but when you use grounded theory, you have to describe a little bit about, there's a deductive, inductive process of coding. None of that, there's some explanation here, but there is a lack of depth, really contextualizing that further. Okay, so here is how, so again, here's the reviewer 1 comment, and I want to show you the response, right? Very simple. We agree with the review and have described more accurately the method of our analysis. See lines 170 to 180. Do want to say something briefly. Let me go back here to the lines you see. This is a screenshot from the Word document, and there's an option in a Word document, I don't know if you're familiar with it, where you can number each line. That is often how many journals ask you to submit the Word version with the numbered lines, because it makes the review process very easily, where you can say something like, look at lines 172 to 180, which is right here, the revised version. So we analyzed focus group data via a constant comparison approach, analysis of the interviews, and you see there's in vivo software. There's a lot more detail there, or some more detail there than the previous ones, but it allows them to, again, easily addressing, like, we agree with the reviewer and have described more accurately the method of our analysis, see lines, and then the reviewer can be like, okay, this makes sense to me. This is fine. This is what I was looking for, right? And so I want you to look at, again, that the response, the rhetorical move, or the phrasing is, we agree with the reviewer, and here is what we did, and here you can find it. All right. So that's a great example. Here's another example from reviewer one comment. So the results section, and this is again from a qualitative work that uses based on surveys. Is that right? Yes, surveys or focus groups. That's what I don't quite remember. What does it say in the original? Oh gosh, I should remember this article, but I don't. I actually did some review for this group as well. But whatever it was qualitative data, right? So either qualitative survey data, or focus group interview data. Might have been interviews. So the results section is the reviewer comment. The response below is in italics. The results section is extremely long with a large amount of raw data, quotes presented. In contrast, the discussion seems to present results in a more synthesized manner. Actually, that's how it's supposed to do it, I guess. Some content appears beyond the stated scope as the study purpose was limited to perspectives around privacy. That's what it was about, privacy in clinical research. Now, I should have read this before. It would be useful to know where the participants' comments are direct responses to questions versus where the themes have arisen in the context of specific questions. So, right, this is a complex comment, and saying, like, this is too long, saying it should be shorter, or there's some quotes are too too numerous, and why is this even here? So here is the response. We agree with reviewer one, or with the reviewer with this point, and have deleted several quotes, including those regarding privacy in clinical care, right? Because this is exactly what the person saying, like, why do we have this issue there? We do find it useful, and you could even add a however here, to keep the quotes regarding the respondents' perspectives of patients' viewpoints regarding differences in privacy protections between clinical care and research, and reasons why patients are more willing to waive their privacy rights in clinical care compared with the research setting, as these differences have implications for recruitment efforts, right? So this all relates to the purpose, the focus of the study. So here, the second very long sentence is where the original authors disagree with the reviewer and saying, yes, we've taken some out, makes sense. However, we're keeping this, and this is why. And they also, in the last part of this responses to the second part of the reviewer's comment around, these direct responses to questions, or these responses to questions that are arisen in the context of specific questions. And here is the response to that, the second paragraph in italics. We have provided more details regarding our interview guide. We would like to point out that our questions were open-ended as opposed to being specific, and hence the themes emerged from the responses to these open-ended questions rather than in the context of specific questions. So, right, so they actually didn't have specific questions. I would even add, and I know that they've done this actually in the revision, I didn't specify it here, I would add in this comment, therefore, as a result, we added some language explain in the results section, or discussion. I think it's the results, or whatever section is appropriate. Probably the results section. Maybe discussion, depends. We added some language explaining that we didn't use that we had open-ended question. Rather than being specific, right? Some more explanation around what does this interview guide look like. So I would suggest to add that here, because I think that would satisfy the reviewer even more. The article was published, by the way, after the review process. So obviously the reviewers were satisfied with this level of response. Okay. So I do want to end this saying, using a phrase, or saying this first sentence here: the reviewer is always right, even when they're not. That is probably always, it is not, he's not, it is from Dr. Pouchet's. Dr. Pouchet is not wrong. I love that explanation. So is he right? What does that mean? He's not wrong. At the same time, there are sometimes reviewers' comments, or there's some comments by reviewers that really are, they can be racist, misogynist, very uncritical, or not really understanding the scope of the work. And again, I see this happen a lot either work by marginalized scholars who identify with marginalized communities and or work on these topics. So just to keep that in mind, that yes, the reviewer is always right, even when they're not. There are situations when that is not necessarily the best way to move forward. So in the spirit of equity and diversity, right, I do want to make sure that I want to make that clear. When it comes to reviewers' comments on scholarly approaches, methodology, and so on, you kind of want to take the stance of the reviewer is always right, because ultimately you need to please those people and address their concerns. They're the gatekeepers here, right? So even if a reviewer, but even if a reviewer is wrong, there is a diplomatic way. Remember, I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned diplomacy earlier, but I always find that if you have the skill of being diplomatic, which I at times possess, but at times also not, because I tend to be very direct. But if you possess the skills of diplomacy, they will work really well in this process. So you don't want to point that out to rector, right? The failure of the reviewer to understand is a failure of your explanation. Remember, causal readers would also fail to understand and diminish the paper's impact, right? So the reviewers are really looking for points in your manuscript that would cause readers some issues, because that's the viewpoint they're providing you as readers. So Dr. Professor Pouchet suggests to fall on your sword and say it's your fault, not explaining well, right? So if that's sometimes the diplomatic way to approach it. So here are some sentences. We have revised the text about issue XYZ extensively to improve clarity. We thought we didn't need to spell it out, but we have now. And you know what? And sometimes, and this is a question of audiences, right? We assume a lot about our audiences because we have to. And often we don't get it right. Often we do, but often we also don't. The second one is we fail to adequately detail the controls, so we'll have revised. Code 4, it was really there, I didn't remember, we're repeating it. And you know what? And repetition is not a wrong thing. I actually find that sometimes repetition in scientific writing can be a lifesaver for readers, speaking from experience. The other code is like, we neglected to provide additional rationale for point and have revised. See lines, blah, blah, blah. You would have understood if you read properly, so we spell it out now. And sometimes, and it's, there is a sort of a tongue-in-cheek here, like the code, but sometimes that's what readers need, right? Just, because we think we're so super clear, I think it really kind of gets to like, who are audiences? And the last one, review is correct. We failed to adequately address, like, we didn't think anyone knew literature that well, so we have to add now, right? And sometimes you get a reviewer who really is and ideally you want those reviewers who knows the topic extremely well. And they will find, sometimes holes that you might not even been aware of. So again, this is, I think, the great contribution of peer review. Some quick practical advice. Ideally, repeat what the reviewer said in your response letter, and then, put your response notes directly following that quote. So if you get the response letter where you have a small paragraph is each comment, use that as the way you reply, maybe put yours in italics or in a different color or something, mark it up somewhere that a reader will know this is your respond. Don't say something, we picked this on page 7, tell them specifically what you did, even if you have to repeat it. So I think that's really nice. Sometimes Professor Silverman missed it in some of his comments. Have a response to editor first and response to reviewer 1 section and reviewer 2, so you don't mix them all up, so just organizationally. Don't say see response to reviewer 1 because it makes reviewer 2 feel unloved. That's, Pouchet's cheeky way of saying it. But there is no page in your response, so repeat it. And reviewer 1, reviewer 2 might not see the same responses. Reviewers don't remember the order of their concerns, so be strategic. Direct editor comments first, big issues first. Don't have a 1 paragraph, don't say we won't do this at the start, at the end. Be more diplomatic in saying this, right? So just some quick sort of suggestions on how to approach that. And then last slide. There we go. See the positives in reviewers' feedback. Be grateful for them. Thank them for their work because it is a thankless task and it's unpaid. Remember that. Be grateful to the editors. In cases of unjust and unprofessional feedback by reviewers, editors can be a helpful resource as well as can colleagues be. So if you get unjust and unprofessional feedback, and it might happen, talk to your network and reach out to the editor in a professional way, and professional can be sometimes coded, but in a respectful way, and and see if you can kind of go if you can dissolve the issue that way.